There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a man's life when he realizes he has been operating under a false contract. It doesn't arrive with drama or confrontation. It comes in the small hours, in the space between scrolling and sleep, in the moment he catches his own reflection and doesn't quite recognize the shape of his posture anymore. He has been bending slowly, imperceptibly, like a tree growing toward a light source that keeps moving. And now, years into this process, he finds himself contorted into a position he never consciously chose, defending a life that doesn't feel like his own, explaining himself to people who never asked him what he actually wanted. I work with men who have arrived at this threshold. They sit across from me, successful by most external measures, capable, intelligent, and they describe a heaviness they cannot name. They talk about relationships where they feel like they are constantly auditioning, workplaces where initiative is punished, and social environments where their presence is tolerated but not valued. And beneath all of it, a single pattern repeats. They've made themselves too available, too predictable, too unwilling to walk away. They believed commitment meant staying regardless of how they were treated. They confused loyalty with the absence of boundaries, and in doing so, they handed over the one form of leverage that actually shapes how others perceive and value them: the quiet knowledge that they could leave and would if the situation demanded it. This is not a script about manipulation. This is not advice on how to play games or withhold affection strategically. This is an examination of a psychological law that operates whether you acknowledge it or not, a law Arthur Schopenhauer understood with brutal clarity when he wrote about the will, about desire, about the machinery of human attachment. Schopenhauer saw that beneath our romantic illusions, beneath our talk of love and connection, there exists a biological imperative, a force he called the will to life, that orchestrates human behavior according to principles we rarely admit to ourselves. And one of those principles is this: value is always tied to the possibility of loss. The moment you signal that you will remain regardless of how you are treated, you have communicated something far deeper than words. You have announced that your presence has no cost, no threshold, and no point at which it will be withdrawn. And human nature, that ancient machinery Schopenhauer spent his life dissecting, responds to that signal with a kind of contempt it doesn't even know it feels. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why the men who seem willing to leave are the ones who are pursued, respected, and never taken for granted, and what quietly dies inside the men who cannot access that willingness, even when every part of their life is telling them they should. Arthur Schopenhauer lived in a world that was beginning to industrialize, just beginning to wrestle with the gap between Enlightenment ideals of reason and the darker truths of human motivation that those ideals sought to obscure. He watched men ruin themselves over women, watched relationships built on illusion collapse into resentment, watched the machinery of desire grind individuals into patterns they never chose. And unlike the philosophers who came before him, who spoke of love in elevated terms, as something transcendent or divine, Schopenhauer looked at it with the eyes of a naturalist examining an insect. He saw the will, the blind, relentless drive toward reproduction and survival, puppeteering human beings through emotions they mistook for personal choice. He saw romantic love, not as a meeting of souls, but as nature's trick, a narcotic designed to ensure the species continues, regardless of whether the individuals involved are made happy or whole by the process. And he saw something else, something modern men are living out in real time but rarely name, that the moment a man subordinates his purpose, his direction, his self-respect to the gravitational pull of sexual or romantic desire, he enters a contract written by biology, not by his conscious will. And in that contract, he loses. Not because women are villains, not because desire itself is wrong, but because the logic of attraction, the deep pre-verbal calculus that governs who is pursued and who is taken for granted, operates on one fundamental axis: perceived autonomy. The man who is willing to leave, who carries that possibility not as a threat but as a quiet fact embedded in his posture, his decisions, his refusal to negotiate his own boundaries, that man is operating from a position Schopenhauer would recognize as aligned with the will's respect for strength. The man who cannot leave, who has made his entire emotional economy dependent on one person's approval, has violated that logic. And he will be treated accordingly. Here is the thesis, the spine of everything that follows. A man who is unwilling to leave, who has made himself emotionally, psychologically, or practically dependent on a woman's continued presence or approval, has already lost her respect, even if she doesn't consciously realize it. because he has signaled that his value is not scarce, his presence is not conditional, and therefore his opinion, his needs, his boundaries carry no real weight. He has become the kind of man nature does not reward. Let me show you how this plays out. A man meets a woman. There is attraction, chemistry, the early electricity of possibility. He begins to invest time, attention, emotional availability. He believes this is what good men do. He has been told that consistency, that showing up, that being vulnerable and open, these are the behaviors that build trust and intimacy. And in a certain context, they do. But here is what he doesn't see. Every investment he makes, without requiring reciprocity, every boundary he fails to enforce, every moment he tolerates behavior that violates his standards, because he is afraid of losing her, he is teaching her, at a level far below conscious thought, that his presence has no threshold, that he will stay regardless. She begins to test, not consciously, not maliciously, but instinctively, the way a child tests the limits of a parent's patience. She cancels plans at the last minute. She becomes less responsive. She criticizes him in ways she wouldn't have early on. And instead of withdrawing, instead of recalibrating his investment to match hers, he doubles down. He reassures her. He explains himself. He tries harder. He tells himself she's going through something, that love requires patience, that real men don't run when things get difficult. And all of this might sound noble, might feel like integrity. Still, Schopenhauer would see it clearly. This is a man being operated by the will, by the machinery of desire, justifying his own self-abandonment with the language of virtue. I once spoke to a man who had been in a relationship 3 years. She had slowly, incrementally withdrawn physical affection, respect, and effort. She would go silent for days, then reappear without explanation. She made plans with friends and forgot to tell him. She mocked him in front of others, small jabs that accumulated into a portrait of contempt. And when I asked him why he stayed, he looked at me as if the question itself was foreign. "Because I love her," he said. "Because you don't just leave when things get hard." I asked him what she had done to earn that loyalty. Silence. He had never asked himself that question. He had built his identity around being the kind of man who doesn't leave, and in doing so, he had given away the only currency that could have preserved the relationship, the real possibility of his absence. Compare that to another man with a similar background and similar relationship dynamics. But when his partner began the same pattern, cancellations, disrespect, and withdrawal, he did something different. He didn't argue, he didn't chase, he didn't explain. He pulled back, he stopped initiating. He made plans without her. He didn't announce it, didn't weaponize it. He just moved as if her presence in his life was optional, not essential. And within 2 weeks, everything changed. She reached out to ask what was wrong. He told her calmly what he would accept and what he wouldn't. She could feel, without him saying it directly, that he was prepared to walk away. Not as a bluff, as a fact. And her entire nervous system responded to that fact with a form of respect and re-engagement the first man had spent 3 years begging for and never received. This is the mechanism Schopenhauer identified. The will respects strength, not cruelty, not game playing, but the quiet, immovable fact of a man who knows his own value and will not negotiate it downward for comfort or companionship. And the moment that willingness to leave is absent, the moment a man has made himself dependent, he has handed over his leverage. He is no longer an autonomous agent. He is a resource, predictable, managed, and ultimately resented. Now let's go deeper into how this collapse actually happens, because it is never sudden. It is a series of small negotiations, each one seemingly harmless, each one eroding the foundation of respect just a little more. It begins with a thought, a small internal compromise. She does something that bothers him. Maybe she speaks to him dismissively in front of friends. Maybe she cancels plans without apology. Maybe she checks her phone constantly when they're together, a small but consistent signal that her attention is elsewhere, and he feels it. That slight contraction in his chest, the sense that something is wrong. But instead of addressing it, he talks himself out of it. She didn't mean it. I'm being too sensitive. This isn't worth a fight. And in that moment, he has crossed a threshold. He has prioritized comfort over truth. He has chosen the short-term peace of avoiding conflict over the long-term integrity of maintaining his boundaries. Schopenhauer would say, this is the will beginning to write his script for him. The desire to keep her, to avoid the pain of potential loss has become stronger than his commitment to his own standards. And once that trade is made, it becomes easier to make it again. The next time she does something similar, the internal negotiation is faster, the threshold lowers, and over time, he finds himself tolerating behavior he would have found unacceptable at the beginning, not because his values have changed, but because his dependence has grown. He has allowed her to become the center of his emotional world, and everything else, his mission, his friendships, his hobbies, his self-respect, has been quietly subordinated to the goal of keeping her happy, keeping her present. I work with men who describe this process like waking up from a long sleep. They look back at the past year, 2 years, 5 years, and they see a version of themselves they don't recognize. A man who stopped going to the gym because he preferred to stay home. A man who stopped seeing friends because she got insecure when he had plans without her. A man who stopped pursuing his business goals because she needed more attention, more reassurance, more of his time. And at every stage he told himself this was love, this was partnership, this was what mature men do. But Schopenhauer would see it clearly. This is a man being consumed by the will's machinery, sacrificing himself on the altar of a desire he has mistaken for his own autonomous choice. And here is the cruelest part. The more he sacrifices, the less she respects him. Not because she is a bad person, not because she is consciously trying to hurt him, but because the deep pre-verbal logic of attraction, the logic the will operates on, does not reward self-abandonment. It interprets his willingness to bend as evidence of low value. If he will tolerate disrespect, if he will rearrange his entire life to accommodate her, if he will stay regardless of how he is treated, then his presence must not be worth very much. This is not a conscious thought. This is the ancient calculus of selection, operating in the background, shaping her feelings in ways she could never articulate. And so she begins to pull away, not all at once, but gradually. She becomes less interested in sex. She becomes more critical. She spends more time on her phone, more time with friends, more time in a world that doesn't include him. And he, sensing this withdrawal, panics. He tries harder. He buys gifts. He plans elaborate dates. He writes long messages explaining his feelings, trying to make her understand how much he cares. And all of it has the opposite effect, because every active pursuit, every attempt to win her back, is further proof that he cannot walk away. And the less willing he is to walk away, the less valuable his presence becomes. I once spoke to a man who had spent 6 months in this cycle. His girlfriend had emotionally checked out, but she hadn't left. She kept him in a kind of limbo, distant but not gone, present but unavailable. He spent every day trying to figure out what he could do differently, what he could say, how he could fix it, and when I asked him why he didn't just leave, he looked at me like I had suggested self-harm. "Because I don't give up on people," he said. I told him, "You're not giving up on her. You're giving up on yourself. You have made her approval the measure of your worth, and as long as that remains true, you will never have her respect, because respect is only given to men who respect themselves enough to leave when they should." The man she later pursued, the one who came after him, wasn't more attractive, wasn't wealthier, wasn't funnier. The difference was simple. He didn't need her. He wanted her. He enjoyed her. But his life, his purpose, his sense of self were not dependent on her continued presence. And she could feel that. She could feel that he would walk away if she treated him the way she had treated the previous man. And that possibility, that quiet, unspoken fact of his autonomy, created a form of respect and desire the first man had spent 6 months begging for and never received. This is the mechanism. This is the machinery Schopenhauer spent his life mapping. The will does not reward dependence. It rewards strength, autonomy, and the capacity to endure loss without collapsing. And the man who cannot access that capacity, who has built his identity around being needed, around being loyal no matter the cost, has placed himself in a position where he will be used, tolerated, and eventually discarded, not because women are cruel, but because he has violated the logic of attraction at its deepest level. Now zoom out. This is not just about individual men and individual relationships. This is a pattern playing out across an entire generation, across an entire culture. We live in a world where men are told, from every angle, that their value lies in their utility, in their willingness to provide, to protect, to sacrifice, to stay. They are told that walking away is weakness, that setting boundaries is selfish, that prioritizing their own mission is toxic. And so they stay in jobs that drain them, in relationships that diminish them, in social environments that treat them as disposable. They stay because they have been taught that staying is a virtue, that enduring is strength. But Schopenhauer would see this clearly. This is not virtue. This is the will manipulating men into behaviors that serve the continuation of the species, the stability of social structures, the comfort of others, but not the flourishing of the men themselves. Look at the modern dating landscape. Apps that reduce men to a set of pictures and a bio, judged in seconds, discarded with a swipe. Social media creates an illusion of infinite options, making every real person feel replaceable. A culture that celebrates female hypergamy while shaming male standards, divorce laws that punish men for commitment, custody arrangements that separate fathers from children, workplaces where a single false accusation can destroy a career without due process, and through all of it, men are told, stay, try harder, be better, don't complain. And many men, good men, men who want to do the right thing, absorb this message and internalize it. They become the kind of men who will endure anything, tolerate anything, and sacrifice anything because they believe that is what good men do. But here is what Schopenhauer understood. What the modern world has forgotten. A man who will endure anything is a man who will be given everything to endure. If you signal that you have no threshold, that you will remain regardless of how you are treated, the world will test that claim. It will see how much you will tolerate, and it will keep pushing until you break or finally remember you have the option to leave. This is not about hating women. This is not about refusing commitment or a relationship. This is about understanding that respect, real respect, the kind that sustains attraction and partnership over time, is only possible when both people know that the other has the capacity to leave. When a woman knows that a man will stay no matter what, she loses respect for him, not because she wants to, but because the machinery of attraction does not operate on conscious choice. It operates on perceived value. And perceived value is always tied to scarcity, to conditionality, to the possibility of loss. If you are a man who has made yourself endlessly available, who has rearranged your life around someone else's comfort, who has tolerated disrespect because you were afraid of being alone, you have placed yourself in a losing position, not because you are weak, not because you are bad, but because you have violated a law of human nature that operates regardless of your intentions. And the cost of that violation is steep. It is the slow erosion of self-respect. It is the creeping resentment that builds when you realize you have been giving far more than you receive. It is the numbness that settles in when you look at your life and realize it doesn't belong to you anymore, that you have been living according to someone else's script, someone else's needs, someone else's approval. Schopenhauer would say this is the suffering the will creates when it hijacks individual lives for its own purposes. You thought you were choosing love, you thought you were being a good partner, but underneath, the will was using your desire, your loneliness, your fear of loss to keep you locked in a pattern that serves its purposes but destroys yours. And the way out, the only way out, is to reclaim your willingness to leave, not as a threat, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a deep internal knowing that your presence in any situation, relationship, job, or friendship is conditional on how you are treated, that you will not stay where you are not respected, that you will not negotiate your boundaries downward for comfort, that you are willing to endure the pain of loss rather than the slow death of self-abandonment. If a system demands your vulnerability but offers no protection, walking away is not cowardice. It is the only rational response. If a relationship requires you to shrink, to suppress your needs, to constantly prove your worth, leaving is not failure. It is self-respect. If a woman treats your presence as a given, as something she can take for granted while she explores other options, withdraws affection, or disrespects you openly, staying is not loyalty. It is self-betrayal. And the moment you understand this, the moment you internalize it at a level deeper than thought, everything changes. Let me show you what this looks like in practice, not as a list, not as steps, but as a shift in how you move through the world. Notice when you are explaining yourself to someone who has not earned an explanation. Most men, when they feel their value being questioned or sense disrespect or withdrawal, immediately move into explanation mode. They try to justify their choices, their feelings, their boundaries. They believe that if they can make her understand, she will respect them. But Schopenhauer would see this clearly. Explanation is a form of pleading. It is an attempt to negotiate your value upward through words, and it never works, because respect is not given based on arguments, but on perception, on the quiet, unshakable sense that a man knows his own worth and does not require external validation to confirm it. So when you feel the urge to explain, to justify, to convince, stop. State your boundary, your decision, your reality, and allow her to respond however she responds. If she respects it, good. If she doesn't, you have learned something essential about how she values you. And that information is more valuable than any temporary peace you might have gained through explanation. Notice when you are investing in someone who is not investing in you. This is the most common trap. A man sees potential. He sees what the relationship could be if she would meet him halfway, if she would just put in the same effort he is. And so he keeps investing, keeps giving, keeps showing up, hoping that his consistency will eventually inspire her to reciprocate. But hope is not a strategy, and consistency without reciprocity is not love. It is self-destruction. Schopenhauer would say you are being operated by the will, by the illusory promise that if you give enough, sacrifice enough, she will finally see your value. But value does not work that way. Value is perceived scarcity. And the more you give without receiving, the less scarce you become. So stop. Match her investment. If she pulls back, you pull back. If she becomes less available, you become less available. Not as punishment, not as a game, but as a reflection of reality. You are a man with options, with a mission, with a life that exists independent of her presence. And your time, your attention, and your emotional energy are finite resources that you allocate based on reciprocity and respect. Notice when you are staying in a situation because you are afraid of being alone. This is the deepest trap. Many men remain in relationships, jobs, and friendships that drain them because the alternative, being alone, facing themselves without distraction, feels more terrifying than the slow erosion of self-respect. But Schopenhauer understood that suffering is inherent to existence, that the will guarantees you will experience pain regardless of what you choose. The question is not how to avoid pain. The question is which pain you are willing to endure. The pain of loneliness, of uncertainty, of rebuilding your life from a place of autonomy, or the pain of self-abandonment, of waking up years from now and realizing you have spent your life serving someone else's needs while your own slowly withered. The first pain is sharp but temporary. It is the pain of initiation, of transformation. The second pain is dull but permanent. It is the pain of a life unlived. Choose consciously. Notice when you are allowing someone to treat you in ways you would never treat them. This is the simplest test. If she cancels on you at the last minute, would you do the same to her? If she speaks to you dismissively in front of others, would you do the same to her? If she makes you wait days for a response, checks her phone constantly when you're together, criticizes your choices, minimizes your feelings, would you do any of that to her? If the answer is no, then you are operating from an unequal frame. You have placed her needs, her feelings, and her comfort above your own, and she can feel it, and it kills her respect for you. Not because she is a bad person, but because the machinery of attraction does not reward self-betrayal. So stop. Treat her exactly as well as she treats you. Not worse, not as revenge, but as a mirror. Let her see, through your behavior, what the relationship actually is, not what you wish it were. And if she cannot rise to meet you, if she cannot offer the same respect and investment you are offering, then you have your answer, and the willingness to accept that answer, to walk away from something that is not serving you, is the foundation of masculine sovereignty. Refuse to allow comfort to replace purpose. This is the civilizational threat Schopenhauer saw playing out in individual lives. Men are offered comfort, ease, and safety in exchange for their autonomy, their mission, and their willingness to take risks and endure discomfort. And many men take that trade. They choose the relationship that makes them feel safe over the mission that makes them feel alive. They choose the job that pays well over the work that gives them meaning. They choose the social approval of being seen as nice, as agreeable, over the self-respect of being seen as strong. And in doing so, they slowly become the kind of men no one respects, not even themselves. So refuse. Prioritize purpose over comfort. Make your mission, whatever that is, the center of your life. Let relationships, friendships, and social obligations orbit around that center, not replace it. And when someone asks you to choose between your purpose and their comfort, choose your purpose every time. without apology. Because the moment you sacrifice your mission for someone else's approval, you have already lost their respect. Here is what happens if you ignore this. Suppose you continue to operate as a man who will stay regardless of how he is treated, who will sacrifice his purpose for companionship, and who will negotiate his boundaries downward to avoid conflict. In 5 years, you will be smaller, not physically, but internally. The part of you that knew your own worth, that had standards, that believed your life could be something more, will have atrophied. You will have learned to tolerate disrespect so thoroughly that you no longer even notice it. You will have stopped advocating for yourself, stopped pursuing your goals, and stopped believing that your needs matter. You will wake up next to someone who doesn't respect you, in a life you didn't choose. And you will tell yourself that this is just how it is, that this is what adult life looks like. But Schopenhauer would see through that lie. You will have become a servant to the will, a biological machine executing a script written by forces you never questioned. And the bitterness, the resentment, the quiet rage that will build in you will poison everything you touch. But here is what happens if you answer this. If you reclaim your willingness to leave, not as a threat, but as a fact embedded in how you move through the world. Suppose you make your mission central and make everything else optional. If you refuse to tolerate disrespect, even when it costs you comfort, companionship, and approval, 5 years from now, you will be alone more often. That is the truth. The path of sovereignty is not crowded. Most people will not understand why you set the boundaries you do, why you walk away from situations others would tolerate, why you refuse to play games everyone else seems comfortable with. But you will be alone in a different way than the first man. Not lonely, not bitter. Alone as a man who knows himself, who has built a life on his own terms, who does not require external validation to confirm his worth. And the people who remain in your life, the woman who chooses to be with you, will be there because they respect you, because they see your value, because they know that your presence is not guaranteed, that it is earned through how they treat you. And that respect, that earned presence, is worth more than 1,000 relationships built on dependency and fear. This is the choice, and it is a choice you make every day, in small moments, in how you respond when someone crosses a boundary, in whether you stay in a conversation that diminishes you, in whether you protect your time and attention or give them away freely to anyone who asks. Schopenhauer would say the will is always operating, always pulling you toward patterns of desire and dependence that serve its purposes, but not yours. But you are not only the will, you are also aware. You also have the capacity to observe the machinery and choose differently, and that choice, sustained over time, is what builds sovereignty. A man who is willing to leave is never taken lightly because his presence carries weight. It is scarce, it is conditional, it can be lost. And in a world where most men have made themselves endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, endlessly willing to stay regardless of how they are treated, the man who moves differently, who protects his autonomy, who values his self-respect more than comfort, stands out not through effort but through contrast. He does not need to announce his standards. They are visible in how he moves, in what he tolerates, in the quiet, unshakable fact that he will walk away if the situation demands it. And that fact, that possibility, creates a form of respect and attraction that cannot be faked, cannot be negotiated, cannot be begged for. It can only be embodied. She does not kill your mission. She reveals whether you ever had one. If this struck something in you, something you have been feeling but could not name, share it with the men in your life who need to hear it. Subscribe to this work, keep it alive, because the world will not teach men these truths. The world profits from men who stay, who tolerate, who sacrifice themselves for systems and people that do not value them. But you are not required to participate in your own diminishment. You never were. The man who is willing to leave is the only man who was ever truly free.